Good evening and welcome to this wonderful conversation. Delighted to have Mr. Rajesh Dembla with us. Mr. Rajesh, welcome and thank you for sparing this time with us. We are looking forward to listening to you on gamification in e-commerce and what are the opportunities and challenges that we can look at. So what I will do is I will do a brief introduction and then hand it over back to you so that you can start your opening remarks. Let me share my screen right away. This is called Wise Views Leadership Conversations, which we host every Friday evenings. Gamification and e-commerce, opportunities and challenges. The first 20, including the introduction, it will be 30 minutes. The talk of Rajesh will be part of the first 30 minutes. And the next 30 minutes is the Q&A moderated by Professor Prasad and myself. Ladies and gentlemen, this is Mr. Rajesh for you, the founder of bitzap.in. The portfolio of companies includes startups in e-commerce, quick commerce, hyperlocal, logistics, fintech, food tech, gaming, which cover geographies around the world. He's a serial entrepreneur, and Mr. Rajesh is also a firm believer in the Indian startup ecosystem and is always keen to engage with youngsters in their journey to achieve their dreams. Mr. Rajesh comes from extremely humble beginnings and is a completely self-made man, and he is admirable for the kind of achievement that he has been able to make over the years. Mr. Rajesh has the rare distinction of having played a crucial role in 3 companies, helping them go public in the last 9 years. He is a recipient of several awards in India, Singapore, and London. He has been felicitated by the Economic Times, Times of India, WRCC International, Brand Vision, so on and so forth. Mr. Rajesh loves to live the good life and is an ardent travel and driving enthusiast. He has driven various cars in 4 continents on all kinds of terrains like frozen rivers, glaciers, volcanic mountains, and on flowing rivers as well. This is something extremely interesting. However, that will not be part of the topic that we are talking today, but it's an extremely interesting profile that we have. I also take one moment to introduce my colleague, Professor Prasad. He is the professor and course mentor for the online MBA program. Otherwise, he is the director at academic wing in the ICFAI group. He has 30 years of rich experience spanning across entrepreneurship, corporate life, as well as academics. He's a PGDM from IIM Kolkata and BTech from IIT Bombay. He has published several journal articles, edited various books, and presented papers in various conferences, both national and international. Welcome, Professor Prasad, and welcome, Mr. Rajesh. I'll now close my screen and I hand it over back to you, Rajesh. Once again, thank you very much, and please start your presentation. Thank you.
Thank you for the kind words, Sudhakar, and thank you for this opportunity. It's always a pleasure interacting with the industry folks. There is a lot more to learn than to give, as my experience is. So I'm looking forward to this as well. Looking forward to the Q&A. So before we get there, if you can, I would like to start off with the presentation. If the team can just share the slide, Sudhakar, that will help.
Yes, it's on.
Great. See, the whole idea of the next 20-25 minutes that I'm going to speak is, this is not the first slide, by the way. If you can go to the first slide. Yeah, thank you. So if the topic that I'm speaking about today is not a topic that can be covered in 20 minutes or 20 or 30 minutes. It can't even be covered in 20 days. Okay. The whole world is learning what can be done. And if you speak to 10 people in the industry, they will have 10 different views. I'm going to present my view and my experiences. So if it makes sense, it is great. So what I'm talking about is the gamification in e-commerce and what are we doing with gamification within e-commerce industry. Before I get to that, I would just like to talk about the landscape, the Indian landscape today. If you can go to the next slide. So if you look at the Indian landscape today, we have about close to 900 million mobile phone users. Okay, close to about 300 million people who have done digital transactions, so on and so forth. Everybody who's on this A webinar knows what the Indian landscape looks like, so I'm not going to talk about it too much. However, I would like to, talk about 80% of the people in India who have, access to a device and internet have done the following. Either they've adapted a game or they have bought a product online. Now that is a data that is staggering and an opportunity that is like an ocean. Imagine 80% of all people in India are either playing games or buying something, and that is the reality out there today. What does that mean? If we club the two, can we gamify e-commerce, and is there a need to gamify e-commerce? I'm going to talk about it. The numbers are irrelevant. These numbers, I don't know whether they are really genuine or not. 4.5 million sellers who have, registered as an online seller. Personally, I don't think that these are numbers that have come out of IBEF, but I don't personally believe they're active. I don't even think there are a million sellers who are actively selling in India today. That's my personal guess. 70 million daily real-time transactions happening in a country like India, with about 45% share of digital wallets and about 12 crore, that's about 120 million UPI users in the country. That's the landscape, just to let you know that how big is the market. Now let's go back to the topic and see, is gamification required in e-commerce or not? So to understand that, we'll have to look at what are the problems and challenges, right? So the e-commerce industry is seeing several challenges, several problems. Let's look at the next slide. So the biggest problem that everybody is facing is customer acquisition cost. It's not easy to acquire customers. It's a very expensive affair. And even when you acquire a customer, your lifetime value of that customer, what was anticipated and what you actually get, there is a huge gap. You know why? Because customers are driven by price. Their loyalty remains only with the price. So even if you've acquired a customer, it means nothing, because if a competition is going to come and sell the same product at a lower price, your customer is gone. Okay, you are left fighting for it. Okay. The other problem for sellers in the country is the monopoly of some large platforms. A few large platforms in the country today, without naming any. The challenges with large platforms is that listing is difficult. Selling is even more difficult. Why? Because they have stringent listing policies, return policies, and competition is immense because everybody is allowed to sell on those platforms. So you're lost in an ocean. And if you want to be discovered, then the cost of being discovered is insane, you know. So after the cost of discovery, returns, and the platform fees and commissions, I don't even know if sellers are making money, and which is why majority of the sellers are dropping out of such large platforms today. And there is an emerging trend which is extremely interesting for all of us to watch out. So the other challenge is privacy and targeting. When apart from these 3 or 4 large e-commerce platforms, a lot of the sellers are going direct on Facebook, Google, Insta, etc., and trying to sell their products. The challenges there is privacy and targeting. Again, the same issues. Very, very expensive to acquire a customer, and very difficult to actually drive a sale out of that customer. Even if you do all of that, for a small seller or for a medium-sized seller, managing technology is a nightmare. Okay. And, the free versus paid customer, that is basically a lot of companies, whether it is small, medium, or big, are trying to acquire customers by giving freebies. Okay, but at a time when it's free, the customer comes to them. The moment they start charging, the customer runs away. So converting a free customer to a paid customer is almost impossible. These are the challenges. Okay, and these are some of the challenges that I know. If you talk to more people, you will find a lot more problems out there. So what do we do? How do we, manage this? If we are a seller in this country, and if you want to run a business that has to be omni-channel, then what do you do with it? What are the so let's look at what are the demands of new India out there, right? So our experience, okay, now everything that I'm speaking is coming from our own experience, and that is why some of it is going to be sounding maybe sometimes difficult to digest if you're not in the e-commerce space. So let's look at the next slide. So the demands of New India is every consumer in India wants convenience. Basically, everybody has gotten used to a certain magic, and everybody wants magic. I want to buy a product. I should find it right now, right here, sitting on my desk, on my phone, and I should be able to place an order. And before I reach home, the product should reach home. The convenience that I want to buy all of this, and the best part is I don't want to pay logistics fees. I don't want to pay any additional charges, but I want it to be delivered in a couple of hours at the lowest price in the world. That's the Indian consumer mindset we have seen largely. So the Indian consumer wants everything, but does not really want to pay value for it, right? And today, when we look at omni-channel, what do we mean? What do we mean by omni-channel today? The meaning itself has changed. If you are offline selling a product, for you, omni-channel could only mean today that it's not purely online, but social commerce, right? So when you say social commerce, basically, I know people who are buying products on Instagram. They don't even want to go to the platform or a store. They are on Insta. They want to buy it on Insta. They're done with it. The other thing that the consumer demands is a frictionless experience. So the moment your buying experience takes more than 2 or 3 minutes or 5 minutes, even 2-3 minutes, actually a lot, okay? Or if there are too many steps involved, or if there are too many, forms or trivia or anything that, the platform is trying to capture data, the consumer is gone. The consumer is not interested. Flexible payment options, the, emergence of buy now, pay later, the recent RBI regulation that has now allowed, mandates on UPI is going to make it even better. But every consumer expects that if I am buying something even worth 5,000 rupees or 2,000 rupees, allow me to convert it into EMIs and pay slowly at my convenience. So that's the demand of the country. And lastly, delivery convenience. People want everything delivered to their homes or offices, but in real quick time. That's the consumer's demand today, right? So cost of acquisition is high, and being discovered for a seller, I'm talking about from a seller's point of view, cost of acquisition is extremely high. Getting discovered is expensive. Getting listed is a problem. And then once you do all of that and you find a consumer coming to you, your consumer is expecting all of these things. That is the e-commerce landscape, right? When we looked at it as a team, we said, how can we make e-commerce more meaningful? Because it's not a meaningful thing. Even today, there are, without naming again, there are very, very large e-commerce players in the country that are not making money. They're losing money. They're still burning money, right? Now, what's going to happen next? And what can we do? Was the question that we were trying to answer. And then we moved on. Please go on to the next slide, if you don't mind. So what we saw is, we said, okay, let's look at what's happening in the country apart from the regular, e-commerce sales that are happening. We saw a wave of D2C brands emerging. Okay, what accelerated it? COVID accelerated it. Now, direct to consumer brands, have suddenly become very meaningful. Okay, there are no middlemen, in most cases, or very little, middlemen in the whole D2C business. So we have seen a lot of D2C brands emerging in the last few, couple of years. So let's look at the next slide. Okay, so what is it that they offer? Okay, they are offering a larger bouquet of choices. Until now, you knew certain brands. Say, for example, just let's take cosmetics, right? Cosmetics earlier was what? About 4 or 5 brands, and most of them were either international brands, or in India, it was Lakme. You had, if it was international brands, you had MAC and Bobbi Brown and, so on and so forth. Today, when you look at the cosmetic market, all of a sudden you see Indian brands like Wow, Sugar, so on and so forth. And these brands have not just come in, they have taken the market by storm. Some of their GMVs are in the range of about $100 million, $200 million already in a year, and their valuations, many of them are unicorns. The good part is some of them are even profitable, right? Now that for me is a real takeaway. How can you be profitable in e-commerce? And that is something the D2C brands have been able to show. Many of the brands have also been able to experience the product before buying, even online. I'm not a big fan of it from a seller's point of view, but from a buyer's point of view, it's an amazing option, because I can order something, get it home, try it. If I like it, I buy it. If I don't like it, I send it back. Okay. While it's great for a consumer and it's good for a new brand, okay, because they are able to give the consumer an experience to try it. Personally, I think in the long term, it's a loss-making proposition. Data has to show. It's too early to talk about it. Data will show whether it's going to make sense or not. We will see that, right? Personalization through AI and ML is another thing that the D2C brands have been extremely good with. So basically, it's another form of retargeting. So let's say, for example, if there is a consumer who likes a particular design of Nike or an Asics or a particular sneaker, a new brand, a D2C brand which is selling similar shoes at 1/4 or even lesser the price, is able to personalize and show the consumer designs which are more likely to be liked by that consumer. So that is something that's happening in the D2C business. And accessibility over visibility. Basically today, what's been seen is that earlier there was a saying in Hindi, "Jo dikhta hai wo bikta hai." Today, that is what is accessible to you on your phone is what is going to sell, right? So basically what it means is, if you are a D2C brand, you must make yourself accessible on everybody's phone when that person is ready. And that's what we have seen as a wave in the last. Can we move the next slide? In the last couple of years, that's the wave. I'm not going to delve on this too much. Very quickly, there are some changes in the regulations in e-commerce which I need to talk about, which will change the ecosystem quite a lot. For example, GST. The Indian government has allowed non-GST sellers to be listed on marketplaces and sell. It's not from this year. Many of you are much better informed than me about this. So I'm not going to make a fool of myself talking about it. I think it's from January 2023. But it's a game changer. Why is it a game changer? Because a lot of these guys have not been able to sell, and therefore there has been monopoly of certain companies or certain large e-commerce portals selling only products that were allowed to be sold by manufacturers or distributors. Come 2023, we are going to see a completely new trend in e-commerce. There are going to be extremely small players selling very valuable products at very low cost. Okay, and most of these will set up their own shops and get discovered. They will not generally sell on large marketplaces. That's my guess, and that's what we are enabling them to do. There are about 50 million plus MSMEs that will come, and start selling over the next 24 months. And that's a huge opportunity for anybody who's playing a support role for this ecosystem. 100% FDI for B2B e-commerce, very good, extremely good. Will mean a lot more money coming into the system. And inclusivity. The crux of the opportunity is basically digitizing rural sellers. There are companies like OneVerse, which is earlier it was called OneBridge. There are companies that are targeting rural India and trying to take aspirational products to rural India because they believe their affordability today is much better. In the last slide, I'll also talk about Web3, what they are doing on the metaverse. And for me also, it came as a shocker when I saw one of these companies saying that I am building a metaverse store for the rural part of India. So they are targeting about 50 million users in rural India on the metaverse. To me, it looks far-fetched, but I don't want to eat my words. Nothing is impossible in today's day and age. Next slide, please. The role of gamification, that's where we are, right? Okay, now we spoke about all the problems of e-commerce. We spoke about what are the problems for sellers. We spoke about how the buyer has been spoiled over the years. And we spoke about all of those aspects. So what can a seller really do in this context, right? I mean, if this is the ecosystem, then the seller has to say, it's impossible to do business, right? Or you have to allow all the large, largely funded, deep pocketed companies to take the market, and then you just play a supporting role in the business. We believe that there is going to be democratization. We believe there is going to be fragmentation, and that is where we come in as BitZap, and we bring in gamification into e-commerce. So I'll very quickly tell you what we do on the next slide. Okay, so even before we talk about BitZap, let's look at the trends of the future of e-commerce. According to me, virtual and video first is going to be the decision-making process, right? Earlier, we used to see images, or we used to read, specifications of a product, and then we used to make a decision on whether to buy it or not. We believe that's a trend that is dying. The trend that is really going to catch up is virtual reality. So basically anything that can get me closest to touch, feel, smell, and video at least, okay, is going to be the trend going further. Turns goals into rewards, basically converting necessity into leisure. I'm going to club all of these points and just make a point over here at the end of it. So basically what we are talking about is that the future, okay, is all about giving the consumer a feel and reward at a time where, at his convenience. So examples over here are Zomato and Swiggy. Okay, now what they have done is Zomato says, you're not interested in buying food right now, but you're free. Okay, so what you do is you play the Zomato Premier League. Okay, now what happens when you play the Zomato Premier League? You probably win a 50% discount on your next order. Now, what it means is that you were not waiting as a seller, you're not waiting for the consumer to come and make a decision. Okay, you are proactively telling the consumer, come, I'll make it interesting for you, and giving him a reward for it, right? Swiggy does the same in a different way, spin the wheel at the end of the order. Basically, it's a cognitive hook, and for basically increasing revenues. So in the future, we see that intrinsic motivation will lead to making choices rather than anything external, right? So those are the future of e-commerce, trends that we see. And the most important thing that we are seeing emerging is the fact that a consumer is buying only when he feels good, and he's feeling good at the time of game, when there is a gamification involved, even if it is meaningless gamification rewards. When I say meaningless, what do I mean? There are people playing games and they are winning badges. Those badges have no value. It's not that you can convert that into any kind of currency or get a discount. There are gamification opportunities out there where a consumer is just being engaged, okay? And even that is giving the consumer a feel-good factor. And what has been noticed is brands that have adapted this have seen up to 50% increase in their top line, right? So gamification in the e-commerce industry, we believe, is the way forward, right? So looking at the next slide, right? What have we done at BitZap? So I'll just wait for the slide to change. And so basically BitZap is, auction-led e-commerce. And this is available both in the B2C space as well as in the B2B space. So I will explain how it happens. In very short, we gamify e-commerce. What does that mean? That we put up products of great brands, brand new products. These are not used products. Okay, it's always brand new products are put up on an auction at 50% of its real value. I'll give you an example. Okay, we even auction two-wheelers, brand new TVS bikes and Honda bikes. We also auction MacBook Airs and we auction OnePlus phones and so on and so forth, absolutely new. It could be delivered to your house or it could be picked up from a store near you. It's one of the two. How long do these auctions last? We've learned from eBay that it doesn't work if these auctions last too long. So our auctions last anywhere between 3 to 5 minutes. Okay. And what is it that the consumer gets? He gets the thrill of feeling that, okay, I won in an auction. Ultimately, all that he did was he was buying a product and he was getting a great deal. But the thrill that I could win this product at 50 or 60 or 30% of its price is what drives, okay, the consumer to come back again and again. Okay, now BidZap so far has worked with D2C brands and large brands, as well as MSMEs. So across the board, we've been able to work with various brands. How it works: sellers list their product with us. We conduct those auctions. The winner gets the product and for participating gets rewards. Okay. Apart from that, he won the product at the best price ever in India. There is no one else in the country who can give him that product at that price at which he won. But more importantly, what did the brand or the seller gain? The brand and the seller gained awareness amongst hundreds of thousands of users. Okay. He created an awareness, he created an interest, and in many cases created or generated leads for himself at a product level. So let's take, for example, a D2C brand, which was not really well known. Let's take a cosmetic brand. Not if you've never heard of it, but you came on BidZap and you saw that this product costs 5,000 rupees, is available, on BidZap in an auction for 1,000 rupees, or auction starts at 1,000 rupees, auction ends at 2,000 rupees. All of a sudden, the Indian consumer who's always looking for deals is excited about it and starts to decide, starts reading about the product and decides whether he or she wants to participate in this auction or not. And the moment they decide to participate in an auction or not, they've already become aware of this brand. They've already become aware of this product. If they participate in the auction, we have the attention of that user for a full 3 to 5 minutes when they can't take their eyes off the screen, because the auction is a very, it's a very, the user has to be all the time, actively involved with the auction. He can't take his eyes off. He can't take his brain into something else. So we have his captive attention all the time. And that is the time where BidZap helps the brand create awareness amongst these users, right? And whoever is interested, we have trivia and we have other things. Whoever is interested, we are able to generate leads for them then and there, because there is an intent that is expressed by the user, right? So that's how it works. And most importantly, what we have seen is, like, for example, in a single auction, we have seen participation of more than 3,000 interested buyers, where a brand had spent zero marketing money. Okay. The brand had spent zero marketing money in a single auction for 3 minutes. There were 3,000 people in an auction, and those 3,000 people are potential buyers of that product and that brand. We know that the brand gets that data. Okay. And we could do this every day for that brand. Okay. Even if we did just one auction per day for that brand, there is a possibility of generating 50,000 to 100,000 potential buyers for that brand, right? That is what BidZap can do. Now, when I said B2C and B2B, I'm just going to quickly talk about that one thing. B2C is where we have our own auctions that we conduct and brands can participate in it. So which means they don't even have to have their own user base. We will give them the user base that they can reach out to. B2B is, let's say, for example, there is a brand which is already selling offline or online. They already have a large user base. They want to, re-engage with their customers. They want to give their customers a kind of engagement that they've never been able to give, a kind of gamification of, their selling their product to the consumer. And BidZap empowers, their backend for it. So we are doing it with some very, very large brands. I'm not allowed to use them, but we are doing it with some of these companies which are probably having a reach of about 3.7 million households in India, using the app at least 6 times every day. Okay, I'm just giving you an example of a use case which came to us and said, you know what, I have 3.7 million households using my app 5 to 6 times a day, but we are not able to make money out of it. Okay, and we are not able to see engagement beyond the basic reason why the app has been downloaded. We want to increase that engagement. We want to create some excitement, and we said, okay, we powered it. It's going live. We will know how it works in a little bit of time. We have similar use cases for shops in Hyderabad, shops in Bangalore, shops in Bombay. These are well-known shops in the city. Okay, for example, a chain of shops that is selling electronic goods in Bangalore. Okay, they have about 130 stores across Karnataka, about 60 stores in Bangalore selling electronics. They were not able to compete with selling online. They had their own online on Shopify. They had built their own online shop. However, they were not able to create the excitement. So we said, okay, how can we create excitement? We started running auctions for them, and believe it or not, they have run, I think, so far about 1,000+ auctions with us. So what BitZap does is, if you have a business and you want to create that buzz and excitement for your existing customers also, we are able to do that, right? So that's what we do at BitZap. Moving ahead next, to the next slide. We've done this for, like I've already spoken about it, we've done this for D2C brands. Some of the noteworthy points is that we don't charge them a listing fee or commission on sales. We have a SaaS model for such partners. The best part is there is discovery without clutter. Basically, when there's an auction, the auction is purely for your brand and your product. There is no clutter over there. According to our partners who have worked with us and clients who have worked with us, our CAC and cost per lead is the lowest in the industry, and they've come back to us time and again to work with us. So that's what we've been able to do for D2C brands. So basically, anybody who's looking at omni-channel expansion, BitZap is a great option. We are happy to present it to anybody. Similar to BitZap. Now, I am not here to talk about BitZap. I'm not here to sell BitZap. Okay. But why I spoke about, BitZap as an example is simply to tell you that, the gamification aspect has created so much of interest in the market for various brands of various products, right? So we'll move to the next slide. Okay. The same, I've already spoken about it. We have a B2B solution, so I'm not going to talk about it again. Yeah. So what are the new e-commerce trends apart from, gamification? What we are seeing really is Web3, the metaverse and beyond. Okay. 3D graphics in the metaverse. Basically, what we have seen is brands like Nike, Coke, Gucci, Adidas, and a lot more having invested millions of dollars. In fact, some of these brands have invested hundreds of millions of dollars to create properties on the metaverse. Their belief is that the future is going to be very different. So we all know what the metaverse does. We all know what are the possibilities. We have seen what, NFTs, what kind of adaptation we saw, what kind of drop we saw in the last few months. So I'm not really going to focus on it too much, because my personal belief is it's too early. It's very early to talk about the metaverse. While I wanted to mention over here that there is a huge amount of interest amongst large brands to adapt and to be available on the metaverse for, for their consumers, to keep them engaged, to keep them excited. I personally believe it's still very early, and the evolution where we will see smaller brands, being available on the metaverse and using the metaverse in one way or the other, I think is a good 2-3 years away. We will see what trends emerge. We will see what kind of data we are able to get out of people who are already doing this. So those are the new trends that we are seeing in the e-commerce industry. These are our learnings. Okay. I'm repeating what I said at the beginning. that everybody who's in the e-commerce space has different learnings, has different understanding. By and large, these are very common learnings. What are other players doing to adapt either gamification? There are many ways to gamify e-commerce. I only spoke about BidZap. I only spoke about auctions. There are so many more ways of adapting gamification within e-commerce, right? For example, loyalty itself is a huge gamification system, or you can gamify your sales through loyalty points and make it very, very interesting. That is one way to do it. There have been some very interesting case studies in Korea, okay, where offline, online, people have adapted some amazing, gamification strategies, and they're all available on YouTube. They're all available. So I'm not going to bring some of that data and just put it up over here. So there is a whole lot of things happening in the world of e-commerce. The one thing I would like to end by saying is e-commerce is never going to be what it has been until now. The consumer is changing, technology is changing, demands are changing, okay? And if you are selling, it doesn't matter if you are selling yourself or if you have clients who are selling, they need to adapt and they need to give the consumer what the consumer wants. And gamification works. It has worked in the past. It will continue to work in the future, right? So that is what I wanted to share. Open to the floor, Sudhakar. Thank you so much. Professor Prasad, thank you so much for the opportunity. Over to you.
Thank you, Rajesh. That's been a wonderful, interesting, informative session on the landscape of gamification and what has been happening in India. I think everything you have put together in one place for the benefit of our participants and for all of us here to understand what are the emerging trends and what are the things that we should be looking forward to. Those things have been pretty clear through your slides and presentation that you have made. Very, very interesting that it is not just about the technology changes which are moving from one paradigm to other, from the current high-speed internet to say the augmented reality, virtual reality, metaverse age that we are transforming into, are throwing a lot more options, and it's going to be more and more interesting as the investments are rising. Many brands are believing strongly at this point in time, as you rightly said, they believe very, very strongly that it is going to create that kind of future. I was keenly following your slides, and it is very interesting also because of the fact that the landscape in India and how are the demands of the new consumer are there. These are very interesting lessons that you have put out for the e-com players and also the technology players. So understanding the customer has not only e-commerce, even in commerce in general, understanding the customer has been pretty interesting, the changing profile and the changing demands. I think everywhere, not just in one world or the other, everywhere, I think the customer is changing fast and the demands are pretty unmatchable kind of demand sometimes. You are kept on your tenterhooks, and this is a challenge to all the sellers, or whatever be the mode of selling that we may adopt to. So it's pretty interesting. I don't want to put together, and I'm sure everyone liked it. So what we'll do now is, without much ado, we will get into the Q&A session. The Q&A session will have about a couple of clusters of questions. These questions are collected from various participants at the time of registration, and it has been landscaped into a particular sequence to ask the question. So the first cluster will be taken up by Professor Prasad. I'll request him to start the first cluster, and we'll use the next 30 minutes to completely focus on this Q&A, and we'll open the window for some of those participants who would like to ask you the questions. That we'll do in the second cluster when I come back. Professor Prasad, first cluster. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Rao. Indeed, an extremely interesting presentation. I think brings together some of the major developments which are taking place, which have impact not only in e-commerce, but across the board. Um, I think the problems and challenges and the new kind of consumer behavior, it looks like the entropy of the consumer is increasing. There's a certain kind of restlessness which is seen in the consumer, and then you're trying to find out a solution by which you can capture, ride on that restlessness, on that entropy, and then encash it into a revenue sale kind of a thing. I think that is useful across the board. I mean, it is useful even in education, because people, have 1,001 things and they're not able to focus. They are immersed in all that. Now, how do you pull them from there and get them to learn something? I think even there it is quite applicable. So there is a kind of a framework there which seems to be extremely interesting. To begin with, I'll come to the first question. It's a bit more about yourself. I think across all this experience, what are the key things and competencies that you gained in order to be able to implement something like this?
Well, over the last couple of decades, the one thing, is that change is the only thing that is constant, right? So from various learnings, various experiences, starting from the time I spent at Just Dial, and after Just Dial, what we did at Dunzo, or for that matter, in the gaming industry. The one key learning is that if you do not adapt on a daily basis, and if you're not willing to change your approach to your consumer on a daily basis, okay, then you're going to be in deep trouble. It doesn't work in today's day and age. That was one key learning. The other key learning is that you need to disrupt yourself. If you're not disrupting yourself, then you're open to disruption. Somebody else is going to disrupt you. Okay, that was the second key learning. And then, we've had some good experiences by, wherever we kept disrupting ourselves, and I'll give you an example, Professor Prasad. So when we launched BidZap, right, we had a very highly gamified approach. For example, if a participant in the auction had a better quality of phone, let's say he had a gaming phone, his chances of winning the auction were much higher because it was time bound to a millisecond. Okay, and very quickly we learned that out of every 100 auctions, there were 2 or 3 guys who were winning 95 auctions, and the rest of them were getting very disappointed. So we had to completely change the whole mechanism of auctions and come back in a manner where nobody had an unfair advantage, right? And what we realized is, because we did that, we were able to retain and grow our consumer base, to 1 million consumers already. And while we were with the old mechanism, trust me, we were not able to go from 100,000 users to 150,000 users, because new users would come in, understand that they have no chance of winning, and they would go away. So we had to disrupt ourselves. And that has been something, Professor Prasad, that has been my learning in life across businesses, that no matter who you are, no matter how big you are, no matter how new you are, okay, you have to keep disrupting yourself. That is the key learning that I have.
Excellent. I think 2 key points. First is about the mindset, which always needs to be open, curious about what's happening, being able to have on your radar things which are changing, being able to notice it. And second, if there's nothing happening there, still you need to disrupt yourself, because something may be happening there and you may not actually be noticing. Thank you. I think the next question is about, at this stage, if you look at the e-commerce industry, yes, you have listed out some of the pain points, but if you have to take the biggest challenge which is facing the industry, what would you say it is?
The biggest challenge the e-commerce industry is facing right now, apart from the regulation, is that they are unable to, the whole industry is unable to keep the balance of real trade. According to me, okay, business is basically when you buy a product at X and you have a profit, and you add all your costs to that, okay, and then you mark up and you sell, right? Now, in the e-commerce industry, the biggest challenge is that everybody is trying to win a consumer even today. And in the bargain, okay, they're taking losses on logistics. They're taking losses on returns. And the consumer is being mollycoddled to an extent that businesses are burning money in the hope that the lifetime value of the customer eventually will make sense to us. But that's not going to happen, in my opinion. Okay. Even today, I'm using these names, Professor Prasad. For example, I know I trust Amazon the most, right? Personally, if I have to buy something, I will buy on Amazon today, but I will still look for the best price in the market. And trust me, in my personal experience of buying a few home decor products, which were available on Amazon, I actually went and bought from the seller's personal platform on Shopify, which he's built, because I was able to get a better price. So, to the extent that I had no cash on delivery, and these are, I'm citing examples. I had no cash on delivery on the seller's, platform. I didn't care. Today, as a consumer, I trust I am ready to pay that money upfront. I trust that the product will come to me, right? So even though Amazon has spent probably millions of dollars in gaining my trust, at the time of making that decision, I'm ready to go. So I am probably, one consumer, but I know a lot of people who are doing that. So the biggest problem e-commerce industries are, e-commerce companies are facing, is that they're not able to bring that balance of making money and keeping the consumer happy, because they're not keeping, my opinion is that, the expectations they're setting is not realistic.
I think you're also adding on to this point that consumers are becoming more aware, of the other possibilities, other new platforms are coming in. And finally, there is fragmentation is going to happen, and you're going to get better deals elsewhere. And I think all this is happening together. It fits in with your point about what you think about the future of e-commerce, that fragmentation is going to be there. Thank you. I now move on to the third question. This is how effective is gamification in enhancing customer loyalty? Can you share some examples?
Oh yeah, I'll go back to the Zomato Premier League, and I'll go back to the spin the wheel on Swiggy, right? So every time I order on Swiggy, now I'll tell you some, again, personal examples. Swiggy promises you at the time of taking the order, let's say 35 minutes, the food will reach you. But more often than not, because of rain or because of whatever reason, sometimes it takes 50 minutes or 55 minutes and the food is not coming. You're very pissed off for those 15-20 minutes, because they set an expectation of 35 minutes and they didn't deliver in 35 minutes, right? However, at the end of the order, there is spin the wheel, and you probably won 20% discount on your next order. Now, I have realized that I might have been pissed yesterday, but today while ordering, I'll go back to Swiggy because I have that 20% off on that next order. And that 20% off is valid maybe for 3 days only, right? I will still go back to it. So that is gamification. And that is keeping me hooked on to that particular platform to order food again and again. Okay. That is one example. Gamification does, if it is linked with reward or not linked with reward. Now I'll talk about examples of what is not linked with reward, right? Now, like I was talking about those badges that you pick. There are many, I don't want to name certain platforms, but there are many platforms which just make you play a game, okay, which is probably a 30-second game. And if you win, you get a badge and you go on collecting a badge, right? And there is absolutely no reward. There is no conversion into any kind of a currency, or you can't encash it or use it for any benefit. It's just the fact that it's a feel-good factor you're getting. I have collected so many badges. Now that is engagement. The more you are engaged on a particular platform at the time of spending money, it's a very high probability that you will still go back and spend money on that platform. Now, without gamification, the challenge for such platforms is that the consumer would have come to you only if you were top of the mind recall when he was planning to buy. So what you're ensuring with gamification is that you are top of the mind recall. Okay. You're keeping him engaged. You're keeping him entertained. Okay. So that works as well. So yes, gamification helps in, keeping consumer hooked to you.
So top of the mind recall is one connect which we have for those who only engage and don't give any economic rewards to the engagement. And the other thing I think that we mentioned is that there's a service deliverable which did not take place, and gamification put a substitute to it and got them back to as a customer.
Absolutely, absolutely. Just like to add one single point to it. Now there are new trends in in the fintech industry, which is gamifying e-commerce as well in a small way, in a different way. A lot of like I spoke about collecting money in installments, with a mandate on UPI, right? Now that itself can be gamified so beautifully. There are many companies, like say, for example, there's a company in Bangalore called Decentro. It's a Y Combinator company. They are empowering, startups to get APIs to be able to integrate buy now, pay later on UPI. And what that does is, for a consumer who is salaried, let's say, for example, somebody who's earning 50,000 rupees a month, 60,000 rupees a month, it makes a huge amount of difference. Until now, and this is why I wanted to mention this point, until now, the entire underwriting of that loan was coming from an NBFC or coming from a fintech partner who was taking the risk. There were partners who were taking part risk with FLDG and so on and so forth. However, now going further, okay, I personally believe that a lot of small online sellers, even sellers without GST, will be able to underwrite this on their own. I'll give you a very simple example, Professor Prasad. Now, let's say, for example, somebody is, manufacturing, these kind of phone covers, right? And the cost of this phone cover may be 100 rupees to him, but he's selling it at 900 rupees. Okay, that's the kind of margin. Phone is just one example, the phone cover, there could be any product. Now, when the margin is so huge, he doesn't need an NBFC to, underwrite that risk. What these sellers are going to do going further is they are going to come and tell online platforms that, you collect the money in 3 installments, 0 interest. It's okay if the customer doesn't pay after the first installment, because within the first installment, he has recovered 3x of his cost. Okay, now that is the extreme case where there is an 800% margin, but there are even more, realistic cases where there is 100% margin also, right? A 100 rupee product being sold at 200 rupees is still great for a seller, because if he gives you 3 installments, he's already recovered 33% of the cost in the first installment, right? So all of this is going to get gamified, where small sellers will no longer depend on NBFCs to give you that underwriting capability. They will start underwriting it. And SaaS players will start giving these small players ability to have algorithms to underwrite that risk or not to underwrite that risk. So this is a new emerging trend that is coming, very, very encouraging for the 50 million small MSMEs, because they will be able to get a lot of new customers simply because of this, new trend.
Excellent. I think you've responded to another question, which is very spot on that. What are the opportunities for a small manufacturer to get into e-commerce with a low cost of operation and high margin? And I think this example has fitted in very well into that. Would you like to add something to that?
Yeah, the only thing I would like to add is that I would love to speak to this gentleman. I have some synergy that we could do business with. No, for manufacturers especially, I think the time to come, is very, very encouraging, because if they can eliminate all, in the supply chain, if they can eliminate everyone else, there are 2 pieces which are, one is the fintech piece, which is very easily available today. The other is the logistics piece, which is very easily available today with companies like ShipRocket and Picker and, Delivery and everyone else doing a beautiful job. Actually, manufacturers, in my opinion, with high margins, should eliminate people in the supply chain, supply directly, get online. There are enough There are enough, Shopify is just one example. Shopify, in my opinion, is expensive to, run a store, but they're good. There are other players out there in the market. I run another company which is called Zoozle Shop. We enable, manufacturers to set up their own online stores, including payment and logistics support, for as low as 500 rupees, a fixed fee of as low as 500 rupees a month, right? So for manufacturers, I think the time to come is very encouraging. The word of caution is quality has to be, extremely, you have to be very quality conscious as a manufacturer. You have to cater to a market which is going to compare you with the best in the world. So in your eagerness to keep the price low, do not compromise on quality is the only other aspect that I would like to mention over here.
Thank you. I think the power is off here, so sorry for the disturbance. I think you also responded to another question which came in about, and the concern there was, is gamification in e-commerce assigned to attract, acquire customers, but throwing the wind as far as the service deliverables pitch. I think you responded to that in your earlier response, but would you like to add to that again?
I didn't understand the question. If you don't mind, could you just elaborate for me?
Yeah, this was a concern. I mean, by one of the those who are attending, is gamification in e-commerce assigned to attract, acquire customers, but throwing into the wind the service deliverables pitch?
Oh, yeah. A very valid question. The answer is really no. See, if you want to remain in business in the long term, there are few basics of business that cannot be compromised. One is the quality of your product, the quality of your service, the response to your consumers, requirements. Those are all a given. When we say gamification in e-commerce, assuming that all of that is in place, that's the basic foundation of your business. Gamification in e-commerce is basically a tool to probably get a consumer or attract, engage a consumer and make it interesting, because you want to give the person a feeling that he won something, or you want him to have fun while shopping. Okay, that's all. But if your basics are not in place, you're not going to last in business. So don't even, it's not a substitute for anything else.
Absolutely. I think the basic economic value needs to be in place, and the other things add on and build around it.
Absolutely.
You've been engaged with a lot of startups. You're a serial entrepreneur. So how do you get a feel whether a startup will be successful or not? What do you look for?
I have spoken about it in several public forums. I am a person who goes by my gut. Many years ago, I met a gentleman called Julian Robertson. I learned whatever I learned about startup investments from him. He was the original founder of the Tiger Fund. My three questions to him were very similar to, how do I make an investment? How can I decide whether it's worth it or not? He had given me some insights. I'm sharing that with you, right? He said that he never invests in a business idea. He always invests in the founder. He said it's the team that makes the business work. It's not the idea that makes the business work. That was number one. Number two, he said that, creating a new habit is very difficult and it's a very time-consuming process. So if possible, invest in a business where the market is already existing and you're trying to get a piece of that market in a more innovative manner, or you're trying to bring in some value into that business. So that was the other learning. And the third is obviously what I have followed all my life is my gut. Sometimes you have a gut and you just follow your gut. That's about it. Sometimes data can't always work. When I made an investment in Dunzo, there was absolutely no chance that there was any data which could prove that Dunzo will succeed. Or for that matter, a few months ago, I made an investment in a startup which is fragmenting real estate to a token level. So I'll tell you what this startup does, and then until now, there are fragmented real estate opportunities where you can invest 10 lakhs a piece or 25 lakhs a piece and own a small piece of the real estate. But like an SIP, where can you invest 500 rupees a month and own up, 1 square feet of, or a part of a square feet of a Marriott hotel, or Trade Tower, World Trade Tower, so this startup is doing something like that. It's called Alt, Alt DRX. That's the Alt Digital Real Exchange, Digital Real Estate Exchange, altdrx.com. The team is wonderful. Okay. Idea is amazing, because at the end of the day, the underlying asset for an investor is basically real estate. Nothing can go wrong with it. I mean, and you have a monthly yield, right? So while the business model, that is very, very solid, the gut was that this team will be able to pull it off. Okay. And it's worked for us. When I invested in the month of April at an X value, they have now raised their next round at 7x of that value. So April till now, it's about, on paper valuation is about 7x. You follow your gut, you believe sometimes, and you just make those investments. It works. While all of us speak about all our success stories, for every one success story, there are at least 3 or 4 failures. Okay, and don't get enamored. I mean, if you're planning to invest in startups, follow your own path. There is no formula that can teach you that this will succeed or not. That's my gut.
Absolutely. I think what you mentioned is more fundamental than technical, about how the team is, what your gut feel is, and about riding a current wave and then adding value to it rather than trying to change the world. There are a couple of more questions, but I'll stop here and hand it back to Professor Rao.
Thank you very much. You should have actually continued. It is very, very interesting in terms of Rajesh's responses to some of the very interesting questions on startups and how small businesses with high margins can do. I think that's a fantastic response we have heard from Rajesh on that. And I'm sure it is going to come back again in some form or the other. So, ladies and gentlemen, what I suggest to some of the enthusiastic participants is, if you have questions to directly ask Mr. Rajesh, you can raise your hand and I will make sure that you're brought on along with the audio being opened for you to ask the question directly. In the meantime, I'll take a couple of questions. I'll raise a couple of questions and then see what we can do out there. It's already 5 o'clock, 5-6. Maybe we will take a few questions here and also direct questions from the audience now. Rajesh, with your permission, the second cluster has questions on application. I'll try to make it very short, but let's see. But these are curious questions in terms of how gamification is being applied in variety of sectors and variety of businesses that some of the participants think can be looked at, and some ideas they would like to seek from you as well. How can gaming trigger? I mean, this is a loaded question. How can gaming trigger a consumer while purchasing a hygiene product? With a lot of doubt, this question has been raised. For example, someone is purchasing a hygiene product. How can gaming help trigger curiosity and interest in the consumer?
I really don't have a very specific answer to that, Sudhakar. It'll have to be thought through.
Yes.
However, the answers go back to what I've already spoken. See, gamification of any business, basically what it does is it creates engagement, it creates awareness, and it creates a certain amount of affinity with the brand. Now, whether it's a hygiene product or whether it is anything else, the consumer at the end of the day feels connected to the brand, right? Now, if you're trying to drive information, okay, saying that this particular hygiene product is better than some other hygiene product, if the intent is to educate the customer about the benefits that your hygiene product is able to provide, okay, that can be gamified very well, right? So the question itself is not fully clear to me. So if I understand what is the objective, that can be answered better. But I think this is what the person's asking. So
fair enough. Yeah.
Yeah, gamification can be used for educating your consumer very, very well. So the games have to be designed. Okay, the engagement has to be designed. There are enough players out there in the market who can create these, products. If it is online, even if it is offline, it can be created. I think that's my answer, Sudhakar.
Fantastic. We have one hand raised that we'll come to little later. Probably some explanation will be there. Second question that we have is, is there any dedicated organization in India to regulate and certify online gamification? Does it fall under, or do we have any organization for regulation?
So I'll explain. This is a very good question, a very, very valid question, right? So people often confuse gamification to gaming. Both are very different. Okay. Online gaming, okay, also has multiple parts to it. There is real money gaming, and then there is hyper local gaming. So let's first differentiate between gamification and gaming, right? Gamification is basically when you are adapting any kind of a gamification strategy to engage with a consumer, where the consumer has, you might be able to give him loyalty points, or you may be able to give him discounts, or you may be able to give him some reward for participating. Now, in such a case, the consumer is not paying any money upfront to participate in the game. Okay, that's gamification. So those are strategies. Again, they are used for multiple reasons. Sometimes it's used for acquiring consumers, sometimes for retention of consumers, and sometimes for education of consumers. That's gamification. Gaming by itself is a completely different, business. Now, in India, there are games like poker and rummy, which fall under real money gaming. There are certain states which allow it. There are certain states which do not allow it. It's a state subject. Okay. Now, they require to go under the, and find out if there are regulations, and they need to get their licenses and stuff like that. However, even there is no licensing authority to the best of my knowledge. Okay. Pure gamification for your business, nothing to worry. There is nothing that is required. Even for hyper local game, hyper casual gaming, where there is no money in, money out, there is nothing that is required. It is basically for entertainment.
Fantastic. It's very clear now, the difference between gamification and gaming. And within gaming, the serious gaming like real money gaming, it has to be regulated, and it's a state subject. Depending on the state's policies, I think one will have to take the approval from the state government, whereas the casual gaming probably doesn't at all come under the ambit of regulation. So that's pretty clear. And this confusion is there among many people. Actually, even I used to get confused earlier about this thing and read one for the other, and subsequently clarify. So this is a very genuine question among most of the participants probably. Okay, that's clarified now. Thank you very much. There's another interesting question. Again, it calls for application. How can gamification be used for nudging consumers towards responsible consumption?
It falls under education. So you can use gamification within your platform to make the consumer aware. So basically educate him on how to use, when not to use, what not to do through a game. Okay. Now for different products, different industries, these games can be created. Again, there are several players out there in the market. We don't do it, but there are several players out there in the market who will be more than helpful in understanding what is the message that needs to go across, and then they'll create games which will be very exciting, engaging. At the same time, it will do the job of communicating what they're trying to communicate. But can you force anybody to behave responsibly? It's not possible. At the end of the day, you can tell a consumer what is good for him or what is not good for him, what is allowed or what is not allowed. Consumer will still do what he wants to do.
Absolutely, we can't force anyone. But the question asked was, can we probably orient or nudge a little bit towards responsible?
Of course. Answer is yes.
Yes, answer is yes. Yeah, great. What I will do now is I will take that question from Ms. Lavanya.
Good evening, sir.
Hi,
Am I audible, sir?
Yes.
Sir, how can the games help in resolving prisoners dilemma in game theory, sir?
I'm sorry, I couldn't hear you. How can
You had spoken about gamification. So how can your games help in resolving prisoners dilemma in game theory, sir?
There is
Prisoners dilemma in game theory, in strategic management and in economics, there is game theory and prisoners dilemma. And Nobel Prize was given for
And-
game theory.
Can
So
I just add to that point?
Right.
I think again, this is something similar to the earlier question that you took. There is gamification and there is game theory. Game theory, which is taught as part of management, how to optimize decisions, how to get to that depending on how people play. And the prisoner's dilemma is one of those theories in game theory.
Correct. Yeah, I agree with you, Professor Prasad. So basically, the difference between gaming and gamification needs to be brought out here, Lavanya. So we are not talking about creating games. We are talking about gamifying the whole experience of e-commerce, people to buy, which is not gaming. That's all.
Thank you, Lavanya ji, for raising that question. But there's a difference between gamification and gaming, as we have been trying to understand from Mr. Rajesh. Sir, there is one more question in the same thing, but it is a little better. That is, why gaming is still considered negatively by people, and how does the awareness and opportunities be created in gaming? I mean, it is clear it is not gamification one is talking about, it is gaming. The negative perceptions that are prevailing.
Right. It's in again, this is my view, Sudhakar. It's very important to trying to advocate. It's my personal negative. I lost network in between.
Yeah.
Right. So the whole negativity around gaming, Sudhakar, is all about the real money gaming. Gambling. Some people have a view that it shouldn't be allowed. That's what I said earlier. That there are certain. It's a state subject. There are certain state governments like West Bengal and Sikkim and stuff.
I'm not able to hear. What Mr. Rajesh was mentioning is that it is already allowed in certain states, like, for example, Sikkim, it's been openly permitted. In certain other states, probably in Goa, it is permitted. But in states like Telangana and probably Andhra Pradesh, it is not permitted. So it's a state subject. Yes, Rajesh.
Yeah, sorry. So yeah, as I was saying that, it's a very personal view. I don't have a very negative view about it. I believe that every human being should have a choice to do what he or she wants to do. The government in India allows alcohol to be sold. There are race tracks in the country where there is horse racing and tax is being collected. So I believe that we are in 2022 now, and we don't need to be governed for everything. People should be allowed to make their choices, and businesses should be allowed to run. That's my personal view. And as a country, if you look at Diwali, every household there are card games and gambling within families that happen. That is something that I don't understand. But if somebody has a negative view about the whole gaming industry, especially real money gaming, that's perfectly all right. It's nice to have a view, and then such people should stay away from such gaming companies.
Great. That's pretty clear. If there are any other questions, please raise your hand. Meanwhile, I'll try and understand something from Mr. Rajesh. This is about one question which is asking, can gamification be simplified? The question looks like too simplistic, but probably the participant is trying to understand that gamification process itself has been complex or difficult for some of the players or audience to participate. So how can gamification be simplified? Probably that is the real question.
Actually, it's a very pertinent question. Gamification needs to be simplified. I completely agree with it, but not to the consumer. I think to the consumer, it is pretty simple. Because most companies and most brands that have used gamification have used very simple gamification. It is actually complex for a seller or a brand to build such products or to build such games to engage with their consumers. And there are quite a few companies. Example is Zynga. Zynga has built several games which multi-billion-dollar brands have used to engage with their consumers and have done a wonderful job. But everybody cannot afford Zynga today, right? A small seller in India should have access to companies that are able to give him ready-made games to engage with his consumers. What I will do, Sudhakar, is if I can find a list of such providers in India, I will share it with you and you can share it with the participants. I think, in my opinion, it should be simplified for sellers and for online platforms more than the consumer.
Okay, great. Thank you. Thank you very much. Another question that I have is what are the leadership challenges faced in such organizations? Probably the participant is trying to understand what are the enablers that the leaders should work on, or what are the things that the leaders should deal with in making the success out of these organizations when you are using gamification as a process.
I think a good leadership team will always treat gamification as a separate department by itself, right? You should have a dedicated resource who is understanding your consumer, who's understanding your objective of gamifying anything within your business. If you are able to have a dedicated resource looking at it, most often leaders make a mistake of thinking, okay, it's just gamification, it's not my core business. And therefore, somebody within the organization is going to, manage it for me. I don't need to dedicate anyone else for it. I think that's a mistake, right? If you are serious about engaging with your consumers, if you're serious about giving your consumers that amazing, experience, then you need a dedicated resource, just like how you have a customer support department or you have a HR department. I think you should have a dedicated resource handling gamification within your organization. That's part one. The other thing that a leadership team needs to look at is sometimes, when it comes to managing profitability, the first thing you start cutting out is what you think is not necessary, right? A good leadership team will always invest in the future, not just in the present. So a good strategy would be to have budgets, at least for 12 to 24 months, for gamification, and to have realistic expectations in terms of ROI. Not treat gamification as an expense, or don't look at instant rewards. You'll have to be patient. So the leadership team needs to have, awareness of such things.
Very, very clear implications for the leaders or the leadership team with respect to gamification in their organization. Treat it as a core function, and also treat it as an investment for future with respect to rationalizing one's own expectations on this thing, and be patient about the results. So that's very good. Thank you very much, Rajesh. Professor Prasad, would you have any question before that? After which I'll come back and wrap it up. If you have anyone, please take it.
Yes, there is one question which pertains to education. Part of what you do in gamification is basically get people interested, engaged with respect to a particular product. Now, in your imagination or in your experience, is it possible to do so in education, not at the point of sale, but to get people to get educated more once they enter a program? Because at a given point in time, a person has a certain intent. So can I increase that intent through gamification? If so, do existing things that you work on at your organization apply, or it's a completely different ballgame?
Oh, very nice question, Professor Prasad. So if I have understood it right, I'll answer it. I think education overall needs to be gamified. Forget about the intent, or forget about the point of closure for application. Gamification at that stage is extremely crucial, no doubt about it. However, I also personally believe the way in not just in India, in most parts of the world, and more so in India, the way students are taught, right, can be gamified. It should be gamified. Make it more interesting. Make it more future ready. I think education requires an overhaul. I personally believe in it. To answer the second part of your question, do I do anything about it in our within BitZap or within Zoozle or within any of? Yes, we do. Especially with lead generation and intent to close, we have an audience which is in the age group of 18 to 33. We have over 1 million such users. Our current engagement is roughly about 200,000 monthly active users. And with these 200,000 monthly active users, we have their captive time of more than 20-25 minutes in a month, right? And that is a hell of a lot of time where they're completely captive. They're not doing anything else. They're not even reading WhatsApp messages because they're on the screen and participating in auctions, right? So we have capability to do a lot over there in terms of awareness and then creating intent to move forward. That is something we can do. For education, my belief is yes, it should be gamified, but we don't have anything that we have built for that right now.
I think there was a supplementary while the response was being given by one of the participants.
Right.
I think the question there was people may tend to remember the game but not the concept. Would you like to respond to that?
Yes, I mean, if the concept or the main product that you're selling is not good enough, then that can happen. Like I said, the answer is exactly what we said earlier. Your basics of business cannot be compromised, and you cannot depend on the game being everything else or the gamification being everything else over there. The idea for any business leader should be that gamification is a support system and not the core business. So please focus on core business, ensure your quality and service and everything else is world class, and then use gamification to enhance and amplify, not to depend on gamification for survival. That's suicide.
I think we get back to the same point. Don't forget your fundamentals. And I think that the main player needs to remember that.
Absolutely.
Thank you very much. Back to Professor Rao.
Thank you very much. It is so interesting that in one of the previous sessions, we have had this exact point coming up. When we try to create activities which are not normal and which dramatize engagement and involvement of these people by way of your cognitive branding, for example. When you do that, the people remember some of the elements in the advertisement because of the cognitive branding techniques, but they forget the brand itself or the product itself. So if you don't successfully weave the product or the brand into the game or into the gamification process, probably we again forget there. So as Professor Prasad said, the essence of the brand or the product has to be kept intact. And this is just an add-on, as Mr. Rajesh mentioned. It's an add-on, add value to what already is the core. So thank you very much on that. This brings us, Rajesh, to a fantastic masterclass on gamification. This is a fantastic session. Thank you very much for this. And I would like to, for the benefit of the participants, very quickly summarize some of the important takeaways. There are a huge number of takeaways, but I'll focus on very few, and then we'll take it forward from there with your permission. I think the session has been very informative. It has reaffirmed some of our learnings on the emerging trends in e-commerce and how the landscape of e-commerce itself is getting ready to benefited by gamification process, and gamification is using some of the game strategies to pick customer interest, whether it is online or offline. A variety of things can be done. It is based on generally using rewards and achievements to induce the customer to take the desired actions. In other words, gamification is about engaging customers in the brand and its products by offering a gamified experience. And the goal of a gamified marketing design is to entertain, educate, and engage. Gamification can be a useful tool in smoothing out the journey of the buyer while keeping them totally happy and engaged with us, with the brand. Sometimes it could be offering the consumers personalized product recommendations based on their answers to some simple questions, or using wheels of fortune to give away discounts or other types of rewards or deals, or offering customer loyalty programs where customers use loyalty points as milestones to achieve through certain actions and events, such as placing an order, leaving a review, sending out the referral link to their friends on birthdays, so on and so forth. There are many e-com players, big and small. There are enough strategies to be built in terms of differentiating oneself on your e-commerce store, your brand, your products and services. One will have to be very creative enough, and there are resources available. There are special domain-specific gaming companies and gamification campaign makers are available who can help us bring in the differentiation. We have also looked at how auction-led e-commerce reduces the cost of acquisition and makes the shopping exercise a fun exercise. We've also looked at the applications from Web 3.0 shaping the future of gamification, not just in India, but around the world. These are some of the big points that we looked at. And the other things that we have learned essentially from the whole conversation, both in terms of the opening remarks as well as the Q&A from Mr. Rajesh, is your ability to adapt yourself, your business on a daily basis, and also disrupt yourself. If you don't disrupt yourself, I think others will disrupt you. And that's a very, very interesting point that stays with us. And it is applicable to individuals as well as organizations. So that's a big, nice response on that. Traditionally, the biggest challenge that we are seeing in the entire process, according to Mr. Rajesh, is that they are not able to keep the balance of the real trade. That is, one is to spend a lot of money in acquiring the customer in the hope that the lifetime value of that customer on this brand or on their platform will be much bigger, but which is not turning out to be true. And bigger players, bigger platforms are also losing money. And therefore, that is a big challenge for everyone. And the hope, once that is a challenge, the hope that Mr. Rajesh has given us is that smaller players can very well underwrite themselves because of the high margins that they operate in. They can eliminate the middlemen. They don't have to depend on the NBFCs. Some of the fintechs are able to do already. Some of the logistics companies are able to do. Even manufacturers can do. And one of the companies supported by Mr. Rajesh is trying to build online stores at a very, very low fixed cost per month. So that is something that one looks for. That's a very, very positive startup. Some of the lessons for the startups, and some of the participants are startups, and they have to take home this important thing, and also the investors in the startups. That is, we don't go by the idea itself all along in evaluating a startup. It is the team that one bets on. And beyond data, the second point is beyond data, we need to bet on one's own gut. There are no fixed formulae to evaluating what is going to succeed or what is not going to succeed. If we are at the right time, riding the wave, and one can make that assessment based on one's gut feeling, I think that one should go by. Data will not give the entire picture most of the times. I think that's a pretty good suggestion for those involved in this. The other important point that Mr. Rajesh has mentioned, and it is to my liking, is that education needs a complete overhaul, and gamification has to come big way in the way we actually educate. So education as a segment, as a sector, will have to take this, and this is very useful for us as well. And we can with some of the people, including BitZap, to look at what kind of synergies we have and how we can work together, both in terms of closures as well as generating leads there. I think that one can look for. The other thing is the lessons for the leaders in these organizations is to treat leadership, this gamification as a process, as a core function. Therefore, dedicate resources for them and don't treat as something not core. So that is going to be very important to expect results from them. Treat it as a core function like any other function, and also be patient and have realistic expectations on the ROIs from the gamification. And there should be budgets that are ranging from 12 months to 24 months, and more importantly, realistic expectations from those budgets. I think several takeaways beyond what I mentioned also have been there part of this interesting session. Rajesh, thank you very much for your time. You were disturbed a little bit by the internet at your end, which was not in your control, but they're absolutely fine. We have been given the benefit of listening to you in terms of your views and perceptions, as well as some of the initiatives that you have taken through your group organizations. All along, it's been fantastic listening to you. Thank you very much for this session once again.
Thank you, Sudhakar. Always a pleasure talking to you. Look forward to more interactions with you and Professor Prasad. And thank you to everyone for your time. Very honored to be able to share my thoughts with you guys.
Wonderful, wonderful. Thank you. On this note, ladies and gentlemen, while we thank Mr. Rajesh for his time and expertise to spend with us, I will send some of the other questions that remain unanswered or we are not able to raise, so that he will come back. And I'll also share a summary with you, Rajesh, so that you can go over that and see if all the points have been covered. And then probably we can share those bullet points with our audience as well in public. On our archives, we can put the same summary. So ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for your participation. And this subject has been a very interesting subject, and also at the same time, it is a niche subject. It is not a subject that on a daily basis that we discover, but on a daily basis, we experience the benefits of this subject. So from that point of view, it is interesting and intriguing every time how we can work on gamification. It's a strategic perspective that one can bring in to elicit engagement and entertainment and education to your consumers. So it's very, very nice. Some of the questions are very interesting. And for the benefit of all the other participants, I must tell you that we will continue the next Friday at the same time at 4 p.m. with yet another interesting guest and a very good topic. We'll see you at 4 p.m. Do take care and read more about gamification. Hopefully all of us have understood the difference between the gaming versus gamification and how interesting it is. There are various organizations and startups in India who are exclusively focusing on these aspects like gaming. And that is also a very interesting world. The casual gaming is even more interesting. I'm not going to talk about the real money gaming. Rajesh has warned me not to talk about it, so I will not talk about it. But see you next week on Friday, 4 p.m. Till then, do take care and wish you all the best and happy weekend.